However, there is also the video of part 4 that is coming up next, so stay tuned for that.
I'm feeling the voodoo in my brain. I ain't my usual self tonight. Walking the beautiful rain. The world rotates around me.
I cannot say I was expecting to make this video, nor ever even watched the Jojo OVA series. But while I was working on the script for the part 3 video, something caught my eye on YouTube. Something on the front page got recommended to me, an AMV of the Stardust Crusader OVA, and I gave it a look, and what I saw intrigued me. I saw familiar scenes of the series I just got done rewatching, but everything looked a little bit off. One refresh later, and another video from a different channel got recommended to me, which was the 9th episode of the OVA. Skimming through the episode, I decided, you know what, I will give these a look. I've never seen these before, and there's only 13 of them total, so why not? I briefly mentioned them in my first video, referring to them as Stardust Crusader's greatest hit, and I will stick to that. 80% of the content of part 3 does not exist in these, and only the most important fights are animated. And Darby for some reason, but he's cool, so we'll let it slide. Watching these kind of felt like watching a bootleg, or witnessing a fever dream. Characters that you know and are familiar with, but everything was just slightly different in look and how things play out. Now, let's get the elephant out of the room first. For some reason, the second half of the story got adapted first in 1993, and years later, in 2000, the first half got animated. Yes, they applied the Star Wars release to the episodes, and I have no idea why. While looking into this I couldn't find anything concrete, but it is probably because the Egypt part was more popular from what I gathered. Also, since I mentioned Star Wars, I find it interesting to find out that people from Skywalker Sound worked on the sound effects and music for the series. Not really anything important or noteworthy about this, I just wanted an interesting fact. However, because of this weird release order, there's quite a discrepancy in the art style for both of the halves. That is because they applied a more modern digital art style to the second half of this, instead of the hand-drawn style from the 90s. And honestly, I would have preferred if they just kept it to the hand-drawn cel-shaded art style for all of it, because it looks so much better. The cel-shaded episodes are really well animated, the characters are lively and, well, more animated in their movements overall. And I am amazed at how good the water for Gab's hand and the drink in the glass for the Darby episode look. The animations for these are so fluid, making it very impressive that this was done by hand 30 years ago. In the first half, the animation is a bit more stiff, and depending on the shading, Jojo can end up looking like a 40-year-old instead of his actual age. Kakyoin also suffers from this. If I didn't know it was him, I wouldn't even recognize him in some shots. The other cast members look fine, however, I'm not sure if this is an issue with the older animation in general, but Polnareff and Joseph now have blonde hair instead of white and grey. Even Silver Chariot is now silver with golden highlights. And the colours of the world are completely swept around, and is now silver and grey instead of gold and green. Maybe this because he only shows up during night scenes and make it stand out more, I don't know. And on that topic, the episodes for Hangman in the Desert are so overlit it is hard to see anything. Everything looks very desaturated, and it is hard to make things out. Not sure why they decided on this approach. Meanwhile, the desert scenes in the later half are looking just fine, and in general for the second half, all the colours pop out way more, compared to the more muted colour palette of the first half. Nearly all of the enemy stand uses have been removed, in order to condense the runtime and to fit it into 13 episodes. And even then, they had to take some creative liberties, especially in the first half of the story. For example, Polnareff is now located on the Strength Freighter, waiting in a dining room, complete with airy French music, instead of in Hong Kong. And Avdol does not return to the group on the island where they encounter Judgment, but he joins in to save Polnareff during the Justice encounter. But that much is a given, as it would be impossible to animate all of part 3 in only 13 episodes total, and they had to get stuff lined up for the other half to make sense. Besides that, there are other small changes in some fights in this part, like Jojo's fight against Kakyoin being in the forest now, instead of the nurse's office in the school he attends. And for some reason, Eniaba can now transform using Justice, to make herself look younger and prettier, just to mess with Polnareff. Which prompts me to ask, what the hell is this face, Polnareff? The second half, however, is nearly identical in how the fights resolve and play out, with some minor changes to the vanilla ice fight. However, for some reason Dio does not throw a road roller in this version of the story, but a gasoline truck instead. Powered Up Dio looks a bit less like a fuckboy this time around, but he does seem to take a liking to murdering civilians during the fight. And the car scene with the senator is way more bloody in this version, with limbs and blood flying around. And, for a fun fact, in the English dub of this, the senator is voiced by Charles Martinet. who you might know from an obscure indie game starting an Italian plumber. Speaking about voice actors, the characters sound alright. Of course, different than what we used to from the new anime though. And as far as I know, no one reprised that role. However, I do have to say I find Dio's voice lacking. Now sure, Koyasu did such an amazing job at it in the new series, so it was always going to be an unfair comparison. But Dio here is too soft-spoken and too calm. He doesn't sound menacing or intimidating at all. Also on that note, Star Platinum's auras really lacked impact to them. Pretty much all of the comedic scenes got removed too. There was no toilet break in India, despite Polnareff using the bathroom. And Joseph doesn't make any exaggerated English screams whatsoever, which is a shame because those are always a delight. All in all, if you were to ask me if these OVAs are any good or worth your time, what would I say? Well, they aren't bad, they're just different. And I would say that the 93 part is better. I'd recommend them if you're interested, have nostalgia for older anime, or just want a condensed viewing of part 3. As I mentioned, they are on YouTube. I will put the link in the description, with the exception of the first 2 episodes for unknown reasons, so you have to dig deeper for those if you want to watch them. Even if you are not in the mood to watch all of it, I would recommend you to only watch the 9th episode, the Derby one, because it is by far the best episode of the entire thing in my eyes, and it can stand on par with the modern version of that fight. Would I recommend them over the new anime? No, I wouldn't, even despite my complaints that the part 3 anime drags on a lot of points. The David production anime is simply a more complete and polished package, even with its length. But it makes for a nice view into a different era of anime if you have the time to spare. It is also worth pointing out that the studio that made these, Studio APPP, was planning on making an adaptation for part 1 and 2, and they even had storyboards for those. And they actually did put out a movie for Phantom Blood back in 2007, though I'm not quite sure what happened to that, but it didn't seem to be received all that well. Also, when asked about it in an interview last year, the animation director did not seem pleased about the whole affair and kindly told the interviewer off. But after airing, it never got any form of home release, so it is basically lost media at this point. There is still promotional work you can find, and there is video footage circulating the internet, but that's about it. Obviously, they also never followed up on those part 2 plans, and 5 years later we got a David production series instead. Well then, I think that about sums up my thoughts on this. I have run out of things to say, and I wish to keep this video short. So, no one-to-one comparison. If that's what you are hoping for, then I'm sorry. I had fun watching these, but I'm not sure if I'll ever revisit them, other than maybe that Derby episode. But I think that will do it for this video. This was my name is Sora, and thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you next time for the part 4 video. For real this time.